Hello and welcome to Feminine Success Secrets, the place that women come to become powerfully feminine. I am Candice Oneida. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about vulnerability, surrender, and feminine power. I'm going to start with this quote from me. Vulnerability is not weak, surrender is not defeat. The reason why I started with that quote is that the concepts around vulnerability and surrender have become completely maligned, or let's say the usage of those words has become to mean things that are weak and lesser than. Now, as you start to fill up and understand the nature of true feminine power, you are going to start to acknowledge the nature of true open vulnerability and true surrender. Whether it's surrender to the divine power or it's a surrender to the community around you and your friends and the intimate people in your life. So let's start a little bit with vulnerability, what vulnerability is. Vulnerability sometimes is initially experienced when something gets triggered inside of us, some old story. And what usually happens when we feel vulnerable is our defenses come up and we react and we push things away. So we will push the person or the situation away so as not to acknowledge or feel our vulnerability. So what you need to start to do is acknowledge that there's actually something vulnerable that's been hit inside you. This is not about the other person or the other thing. What I'm teaching you here is how to feel vulnerability in yourself and how to acknowledge and feel that. Every time you close up, create defenses and push away, you are pushing away an innate power that you have. You see, it's through our vulnerability that we actually get to our greatest strength. I'm going to talk about surrender in a minute too, which is also a position of strength. So whilst we continue to shut off, close and push away, we don't get to access the real strength, even though those characters, those habits seem very strong sometimes, okay? In order to do this, what you need to do at first is something gets triggered and you are going to feel something in your body. Let's just use the heart here as an example. Your heart gets hurt. Somebody says something or does something and it hurts. And you want to go, no, you're wrong, you're bad, you're mean, you are hurting me, right? I'm here to let you know that nothing around you, outside of you, is causing your pain or causing your hurt. It will continue to get triggered until you own this feeling inside you, okay? And in fact, the reason why I'm positioning this is as you start to own this vulnerability, there's an expansion of consciousness that happens. There's an expansion of your heart. It becomes bigger and bigger and bigger through the process of owning what gets triggered. So it starts with, in this example, I feel hurt. And there's power in this. This is why I love the work of Marshall Rosenberg called nonviolent communication. What Marshall Rosenberg taught us through the nonviolent communication process is somebody says something to you, there's an action, you feel something, and you learn to separate the trigger from your own feeling. Now, I can't emphasize how powerful this is. There's a trigger, something is said, you have a feeling. And most of the time that feeling is a vulnerable feeling. It's triggered something, for example, when you were very little, okay? So there's something young that gets hit, that gets triggered inside you. And what we want to do out of self-compassion, okay, out of self-care, is to acknowledge that I feel hurt, I feel sad, I feel pain inside me right now. And it is powerful to acknowledge that this other person has not done anything to you. I have great faith in the human consciousness, in the human force, that nobody is intending ultimately to hurt anybody else. So when we learn how to actually create separation between the trigger, what's said by somebody else, and how we feel, it is the start of the pathway of embracing the power that's held underneath and within the vulnerability, okay? And then secondly, I want to talk about surrender. Surrender is a word that has definitely been associated with defeat, like, I surrender, right, white flag. Okay, that's funny in a way because the concept of surrender that's used in that context comes from the man mode masculine warring, fighting orientation. Because if you're warring and fighting, and the only way you can actually stop doing that is I surrender, then it becomes something that's about defeat. Now I want to reposition the true meaning of surrender, especially in the spiritual context, because the true meaning of surrender is a bit more like this learning of handing over the reins of your life toward a force that's bigger than yourself. So if you were riding a horse and you're holding the reins really, really tight and you've got this big force under you and you're trying to steer the horse, you're controlling life. You're controlling the life that wants to flow through you, right? Now, what if you handed the reins back to this powerful force within you and you handed back the reins toward the divine plan for you? Now, this is not going to happen to you in this video. This has been a lifetime process for me, the art and the learning of surrender. In fact, it is such a powerful part of feminine power that I do not teach about it really in my initial trainings because people are not ready for it. If you want to learn more about surrender at this point, I want to direct you toward a book called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. It is such an incredible story of surrender, and it can show you and will show you how profound that level of surrender and letting life direct you and the divine direct you and what it can lead to. So what I want to do in terms of surrender now is to leave you with the concept of at least asking yourself the question every time you find yourself holding the reins really, really tightly, I wonder what it would be like if I could let go at least a little bit more right now. If I could turn up to something that has a bigger vision of me and my life and my time track and my timeline. If I released the navigation of my life toward a higher power, what would happen? So that's your homework this week. I would love your comments below or any questions. I'm very active in the channel. I do publish every Sunday. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe over here. And otherwise, when you have the courage to go out there and shine, you give others permission to do the same. Bye-bye for now.